Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the DTS Freshman Class Pride panel entitled Embracing Queer Identity and Celebrating Opportunity in Gaming, presented by DTS Audio. Both of our panelists today were nominated as LGBTQ Streamers of the Year at the 2022 Gaming Awards presented by Gaming Magazine, which is a British, UK-based online LGBTQ video gaming magazine. The Gaming Awards honors content and players that champion diversity and inclusivity globally. Ready, Set, Ben and Toph were both nominated amongst 12 other streamers as LGBTQ Streamers of the Year, all of whom have contributed to bringing together communities of like-minded people. Ben, also known as Ready, Set, Ben, is a Black queer content creator based in the UK. We know it's late for you, Ben, so really appreciate you here. And most recently is also one of Twitch's newest ambassadors. Ben has been heralded for his for their big heart and advocacy for marginalized creators, fostering a judge-free environment where people can be themselves and learn about important issues. Toph is a Nintendo variety streamer with a love for indie games. He streams with his dog Cookie. It's too bad Cookie can't be here with us today. And just recently moved back to the US from Japan, where he lived for the last 8 years. Toph has integrated kindness and entertainment into his streams to the extent there is never a dull moment. He's a champion for his community, spreading positivity in his streams and providing a safe space for members to be vulnerable and honest about their hopes, their fears, and everything in between. So with that, welcome, Ben and Toph. Thank you for joining us today. It's a big pleasure to have you here.
Nice to be here. I'm grateful. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Look forward to hearing from you. So we have about an hour, but we don't necessarily need to use all of that time. Kind of just let our conversation unfold as it will. And before I get started, I wanted to mention something about, we often see the term LGBTQIA. Some folks can't remember all the letters and wonder what they stand for. And, it is a synecdoche, and a synecdoche, throw a big word out there, is, it's basically the LGBTQIA is seen as a group instead of individual identities. It kind of describes a coalition, but it doesn't describe a person. So it kind of makes diversity homogenized, as if every single letter in there is the same. So it kind of includes groups. It blots out the individual. Trans and intersex, for example, are not about sexual orientation. They're rather about gender. Mm-hmm. So I just kind of wanted to provide that frame about how we think about it, because I think everyone generally thinks about, we come together in an alliance, but each group is incredibly diverse within our community. So maybe we can start off by talking about the Gaming Awards briefly. I know that when we were setting this up, I think it was you, Toph, that said that, that the Gaming Awards was kind of a representation of queer excellence. I wonder if you can kind of start us off by telling us what you mean by that and how it is a representation of queer excellence.
Yeah, so basically the way that I feel about the Gaming Awards is, one, that it's incredible that we even have such a thing. It's only been a couple of years that it's existed, but it truly is an award ceremony celebrating excellence, because there are a lot of queer people in the streaming content creator world, as well as the game development world, just involved with gaming in general. And for a long time, I'm sure a lot of us have felt this in our lives. For a long time, it felt like we didn't have a space in the gaming community, that we were somehow at odds with I guess the primarily cis male demographic. So to have an award ceremony saying, hey, let's put a spotlight on all these excellent, creative, queer people who are putting out so much love and so much creativity out into the world, like that is something to be celebrated. And I think, again, it is queer excellence. We're all out there being our true authentic selves and putting ourselves at the front line to, in essence, be judged. Because I mean, when you're a content creator, when you're creating games, like, you are putting yourself in the line of fire, so to speak.
Mhm.
And we do it proudly, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's more. There's a. It's kind of a representation of just getting more visibility from content creators as well.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah, there was like there really for a very long time wasn't visibility at all. It was the queer community having to push themselves or into these sort of spaces. So whether it would just be at the gaming awards or anything that we do on this platform that is Twitch or anywhere else, we had to create these spaces um, in order to be recognized. And it's amazing having, like what Toph said, there was nothing like this prior, and now they've got a whole award ceremony for it, and it was absolutely amazing to see all these varied either games or creators highlighted that you may not have even met before. So you're broadening your circles once again. It certainly makes you feel more valued and appreciated, knowing that these things are out there now. It feels a lot better as a content creator knowing that you belong somewhere now, whereas it was like needle in a haystack situation prior.
Yeah. Well, I could also see it as increasing kind of possibility, of what is possible in the community when you see kind of representations and LGBTQ people being recognized.
Mm-hmm.
Also in planning ahead for this, we briefly mentioned the need for queer storytelling and in games and celebrating queer spirit. Can each of you maybe talk a little bit about that and why you feel this is important?
Sure. In terms of queer storytelling, unfortunately, I only came across this like a couple of years ago. Like various games always told through friends or other gamers in the space. I don't know whether this is public knowledge or common knowledge or just a mutual agreement. Where growing up, you don't really have a lot of shared experiences. You're kind of just fumbling your way around as a queer person until like a certain age, and it's like, wow, okay, I didn't have anybody to talk to about this certain issue, or it was, especially in my sort of community in the UK here, it's like you don't talk between each other. You sort of just fumble until you find yourself at a later age. These queer storytelling sort of games or these narratives are absolutely fantastic because now the younger generation can explore themselves. Because you're never really any set, in my honest opinion, never really any set like one LGBTQIA plus. You're part of many until you figure that out. These queer narratives or storytelling games enable people to have real thoughts and think for themselves. It's something that I know I needed or would have loved when I was younger. Even just to see queer representation in any sort of media, it was something that I would have needed. Probably wouldn't have spent a lot of time fumbling around trying to figure out who I was. But now it's beautiful to see, and I eat up queer media, especially video games. The moment I see it, it's like, get that on my wish list or put that in put it in my basket. I need to read this, I need to watch this. But we needed it way back when.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. Toph, did you have anything you wanted to add around that?
Oh, yeah. So I guess on one hand, I 100% agree with what Ben said. Growing up, I think Ben and I are around the same age. So different places, but around the same age. So like the media that we were consuming was, I'm sure, pretty similar. And growing up, you didn't really see a lot of queer stories.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, if you did see queer stories, we were always the bad guys. There was always queer coded villains. I think that's why you talk to a lot of queer people nowadays, and we tend to almost root for the villain in stories because that's who we were for a long time.
Right.
I always like anytime there's like an anime or video game with like a queer coded like sassy femme bad guy, I'm like, yep, that's me. I want him to win. I want him to win because that's all we had. And it is interesting now. I know I'm laughing about it now, thinking about how it shaped us, but back in the day when I was younger, I think that did kind of have an effect on me, thinking that like if I was to come out, then maybe I would be the bad guy. But now it's so nice to see, and I talk about this all the time on stream when it comes to video games or movies or even shows like recently Heartstopper, I believe, is the big queer story right now based on a visual novel. And it's just incredible to me to see so many queer stories that are not about being the bad guy or not about heartbreak and death. Like there's this trope called bury your gays, or I believe that's what it's called, where whenever there's a story involving gay people or queer people, all of a sudden they have to die and it has to be tragic. So I'm really glad that there's this new trend in positive queer stories, because like Ben said, we fumbled our way through our childhood, our adolescence, but there are kids now growing up who are seeing media, seeing themselves in media, and seeing that it's okay and that they can have a happy future and not everything is going to be heartbreak and sadness, you know? So it really is heartwarming, and I'm really glad that that is finding its way into video games as well. Because there are a lot of nerdy gays out there, a lot of nerdy queers out there. Like I was one.
That's great. What brought you into the streaming community?
You want to take this one, Toph? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess for me, it started with YouTube. I was living abroad in Japan, and I was vlogging my life in Japan. And you know, I've been into gaming since I was a kid. Like I grew up with gaming. So when I was doing vlogging, it was fun. It got me into content creation, but it just didn't feel like it was me. And I always thought about getting into maybe like video game content. So I would go to like Pokemon centers in Japan and all that nerdy stuff because it's what I like. And through someone that I followed on YouTube, I discovered Twitch. And I saw, you know, I found this person, her name is Renee. She's absolute angel. And she was streaming Animal Crossing on the Nintendo 3DS. And I still play Animal Crossing every day, but at the time I was playing the 3DS version. I used to play it every day. So that was my first taste of Twitch, was like, wow, this is content creation, actively playing video games and talking to people in real time, people who like the same things you do. So I kind of opened my eyes, and I was like, this is what I want. Because even though I had friends and relationships in Japan, living abroad, and I guess people can really only understand this if they've lived abroad, but living abroad inherently is very lonely. You're always gonna feel like you don't have like a family, chosen or not. So I was like, maybe this is what I need, like a place where I can make friends with people who like what I like Nintendo and gaming and just all that sort of thing. And I started streaming. I spent a whole bunch of money. I don't recommend this to anyone watching. Please do not spend a whole bunch of money before you start streaming, because you might not like it. Luckily, I did like it, but I spent all this money getting my 3DS modded. I got a mic, a camera, all this stuff, and I ended up really loving it. And that was 5.5 years ago. I'm still here doing it, and
thriving.
And regardless of where I am, as far as like numbers and everything like that, and regardless of ups and downs that I've experienced through streaming, through this journey, I've never once regretted going live that first time, ever. Even at my lowest point, I've never regretted it, because there's been way more positive things that have been added to my life that have enriched my life because of Twitch and because of my community and because of friends that I made like Ben. Like I wouldn't have been afforded any of that if it wasn't for Twitch. So yeah, that's kind of how I got started and where I am now, and I love it. Ben?
Well, if you insist. Well, this kind of falls back on like the previous sort of question.
Can you guys hear me?
Well, like the only reason I started on Twitch, and my community is probably sick of hearing me telling this story, but I was going through it mentally because I had just, let's say, I lived in the queer capital of the UK, which is gorgeous, gorgeous Manchester. And I didn't really fit into any particular place. You know, I was surrounded by people who happened to be queer, but weren't like me. And it's, without sort of trauma dumping in a sense, I was pretty lonely as like as a black person in a queer community, because it's still very group within a group situation. And until I sort of met friends and sort of branched out and reached out, there was the only thing that I was left to do was sort of do what I was good at, play video games. So I was similar to Toph, I was spending more time doing that because I was alone. It was just out of curiosity, really. I did go through the whole rigmarole of buying all that equipment like Toph did too, but I'm glad that I stuck it out. And if it wasn't for Twitch, I certainly wouldn't have had the confidence to go out and meet people like myself, like Black people or BIPOC within queer spaces as well, which now that broadened it more than I ever would have imagined outside of streaming too. And the confidence that it's given me has kept me pushing in this space to keep doing it, and the community that I've made, like the friends that I've had for so they're not viewers anymore. They're people that I not rely on, but I know I can talk to, like off the cuff. If they were to call me, I'd always pick up the phone, that type of thing, without pushing boundaries, of course. But I've met some amazing people through this platform, and it all started because I didn't know where I fit in, and it was through Twitch that I now know where I belong in this space, in every other space, and I now know what I deserve as well, which is lovely. I know I waffled a little bit there, and I hope it made sense, but still.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. Well, I mean, it made me think about how we kind of create our own families in LGBTQ community, and what that means to us. Gay people have been doing that for quite some time.
Yeah.
One of the many things I love about our community, the LGBTQIA community, is its ability to erase borders. What I mean by that is, both in a literal sense, country borders, and as well as a psychological sense. I'm wondering if each of you can kind of talk to, any cultural differences in the gaming community. Do you notice any? I know Ben, you spent some time, 8 years in Japan. I'm wondering if
that was me.
I'm sorry, Toph. I'm sorry. If there's any different cultural difference that you notice compared to in the U.S. And Ben, maybe you can speak to your experience in the UK compared to maybe the US or whatever you see, if any.
There are tons that I can speak on. I don't think we have enough time to talk about all the differences, but it is something that I get asked a lot, because obviously when people find out that I'm queer and I lived abroad in Japan, a lot of people have wanted to visit Japan, live there, and if you're queer, then of course you want to know what your experience is going to be like there. And fortunately for me, but I say unfortunately in general because it's sad that it has to be this way, is that as a foreigner, I often got a get out of jail free card being queer in Japan, because in general, Japanese society views you as an outsider. No matter how long you're in Japan, if you're a foreigner and you're very obviously a foreigner, doesn't matter how long you live here, how well you speak Japanese, whatever, you're always going to be treated as an other. And in a lot of ways that can actually benefit you because they don't hold you to the same standards. So a lot of the time when I would tell people like, yeah, I'm gay, they would be like, oh, well, you're American, it's great, like it's fine in America, right? Like it's free over there, so like it's fine with us. And I'm like, well, not really that free, but I get what you mean. So like I would often get the kind of like, oh, you're just like the different foreigner, like everything's cool because but unfortunately for Japanese people, there's a very famous Japanese proverb that everyone knows, and it in English it basically translates to the nail that sticks out gets hammered in, which basically means you never want to be the nail that's sticking out. You never want to be the person who's different. You never want to create waves. They have a very homogenous society. So a lot of queer Japanese people oftentimes don't come out of the closet. There's not a lot of protection against, getting fired from your job, or, gay marriage is not legalized there, though they are slowly introducing it to certain wards, especially in Tokyo, where it's a little bit more progressive. So that's a thing. I was in a bunch of different well, I don't want to say a bunch of different relations. That sounds. I was in a couple of long-term relationships when I was in Japan, and the longest one being 3.5 years. In those 3.5 years, my partner didn't tell his family, didn't tell his friends, coworkers. Nobody even knew he was gay. They didn't know he was in. They didn't even know he was in a relationship. Period. And all my relationships were like that. So it was very suffocating for me as a, as a Westerner who's used to being a little bit more open. Of course, I didn't push it because I understand the differences, and I would never push someone to come out of the closet. So it was fine. It was difficult, but it was fine. But that's a very common occurrence, is people just kind of, and I've also heard many stories of, queer Japanese people marrying and ending up in heterosexual relationships,
Right. Yeah.
because they want to please their family, and then they end
Right.
up, being unhappy. So things are getting better. There actually is a Tokyo Pride parade and festival every year. I don't know how many years it's been going on for, but it's held in Yoyogi Park, which is right in between Shibuya and Harajuku, so very, very populated area. There's always a big turnout. I think younger generation seems to be more open to it, but Japan is, as a society, is kind of a bit slow to change. But I do believe that things are getting better, and that they will continue to get better. But yeah, as an American, as a queer American, America is not a perfect country too. Like, I don't think we have the freedom that a lot of other countries might think we do, but definitely more than Japan. And I do kind of count my blessings a bit more after having lived there for so long and seeing how difficult it is
Yeah.
for queer people.
Yeah, one of the things you were saying about, this gay marriage, it reminded me of a small little anecdote that prior to gay marriage, when two men came together, two women, they adopted one another. It was the only way to pass on, rights and have legal rights. So they adopted one another. But when gay marriage ruling came through in 2015 in the United States, those couples couldn't get married because of incest laws. So
Oh,
they had, right. So it created this whole little legal issue that they had to kind of dissolve that partnership so that they could get married. But it just kind of made me think of how gay liberation has evolved over the years. Sorry, Ben, did you want to share what cultural differences you've learned?
Well, I think it'd be fairly similar to the US. I think the UK here, I think we kind of forced, when we make noise, we make a lot of noise, and it's usually everybody gets on board. And not to be disrespectful to anybody that might be watching, but it tends to be the older generations that are against queer, um, partnerships or marriages, anything like that. For me personally, growing up, I was always taught, be your most authentic self, regardless. My mum, always enforced that. So when I came out, there was no issue there. It was always commentary from like other people say, um, in typical school behavior, and then you go to college, and then it was always that, oh, so you're gay, and I was like, you know what? I'm not sure. Probably, maybe, I don't know. And I was quite fortunate enough to be able to surround myself with people who were, queer. So I kind of just stuck to that environment. Then again, I moved to this city where I then was able to get involved heavily in a lot of the queer aspects of whatever was going on in the world, and we were celebrating everything, every win within the EU before Brexit. If a queer marriage was allowed in a certain place, there'd be celebrations in the street, because I live relatively close to where you can celebrate things like that. There was always something going on. So I don't think I've been. There is your typical, prejudice or um, bully type behavior, for lack of a better
Right.
descriptive term, where people are against it. But I think with our queer community here, it's brilliant to see that regardless of anything, even if it's trauma, people still come together to remember that we have so much to look forward to. We're building a future for a younger generation, one that we would have wanted for ourselves. Um, I know it's not like that over the entire country, but for me personally, I tend to hone in on the wins, because it does make it better. I want the next generation of queer people to feel safe. You might get the few comments, and with people that have been born in a bush, you know, that might, you know, try and give you some hassle, but at the same time, don't be anybody else but yourself. Grow into
Right.
you.
Yeah.
That is what is missing a lot of the time.
so
Unfortunately,
many
some laws are getting changed here, but I believe me when I say the protests and everything that's happening up and down in queer spaces within the UK are absolutely intense right now, trying to change a lot for everybody, which
Yeah,
is
right.
brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's just it's interesting to kind of watch the the evolution of you know where deliberation is coming in. So
Mm,
I appreciate your insight there. I want to you know shift a little bit to you know kind of some you know a couple of the issues in online gaming. You know, I did a little bit of research online and saw that there was a 2021 survey. There was about just under 800 respondents to it between the ages of 18 to 70, and it was published by online roulette.org, and they found that 73% of all LGBT gamers reported experiencing harassment on the basis of their sexual orientation or gender identity. The gamers who are out online are 21% more likely to experience abuse than those closeted counterparts. So to kind of educate folks, I guess you know that might be tuning in, you know, what's been your experience with this in gaming, and what's some of the ways that this is being addressed?
How much time do we have?
About 30 minutes.
How
I was
much
like, oh,
time?
those numbers seem kind of low.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure, it's not 99%.
it was
So
a
in
year ago.
yeah, well, in a queer space online or in gaming space, it's it should never be that it's like that. Don't ask, don't tell. But the moment somebody finds out, it changes their entire opinion of you. It's not always the case. It really isn't always the case. But I know, speaking from personal experience, and I even tweeted about something about this the other day. Like somebody had asked me to remove tags because I wouldn't succeed as a queer gamer on Twitch. And excuse me, what we doing now? Do you know what I'm saying? As a social experiment, I did that just to see what people would react to. You know, how they would react to me as a queer person. Not that it should be ever have to be a conversation like which you do get. Somebody will ask you, "Oh, are you gay?" And it's well, yeah, but what does that have to do with anything? We're
Right.
chatting. My tags are primarily there so people can find me as a queer person. But you do get copious amounts of bullying. We've recently with hate raids and things like that, where people will direct people to your Twitch channel or your Discord to try and disrupt you and get like throw you off course completely. It can be really disheartening, and it's not something that happens once in a once every year or something. It's something that happens constantly, which is it is a shame, and people just need to grow up because we're, we're gamers. We have that one thing in common, and if people took the time to sit and listen to us, it wouldn't matter that we were queer at all. We have a common interest that you can just literally vibe with, get on with.
Right. Well, it kind of emphasizes the importance of visibility,
Hmm.
especially you know with larger institutions and recognizing queer people for their
Hmm.
contributions. Because and even I think having you know systemic education really helps you know youth particularly you know kind of have more of a vision for themselves as well as it reduces bullying. So that's interesting. Toph, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I actually had 2 points. One, to piggyback off what Ben was saying, is, you know, a lot of the times when you meet people and they might, you know, they might not clock you as being queer or whatever, and they can quickly realize that you are the same, especially in this gaming community. Like, we're all gamers, we all like games.
Hmm.
That's a commonality that I think can easily bring so many different people together. Unfortunately, though, sometimes as soon as people find out, it changes everything for some reason. And I think this is an issue that I think not only queer people face, but also women in
Hmm.
gaming, specifically FPS games or things like that. It's very common practice for queer people and women to not use microphones, voice chat when playing games, because it doesn't matter how well you play. you could do 5 matches in a row helping your team that without your voice, and they'll be like, oh my god, you're so good at this game, thank you so much, you're the GOAT, whatever. As soon as you turn your voice, the voice chat on, and they hear you either have like quote unquote feminine voice, or they perceive you as being queer or a woman, all of a sudden it's like everything they take back everything else is moot, because they now know who you are. And unfortunately that kind of is a really big issue, and it's sad that we can't even experience the full breadth of what games have to offer because of that kind of situation. But on top of that, my other point was, and I talk about this quite often, I actually just posted a clip to TikTok, and it kind of got a lot of traction and a lot of people talking. One thing that I think, and I know Ben will agree with this, and I know other people have experienced this as well, is even if you're not getting bullied per se, you're constantly being forced to defend your existence. It might not be like an aggressive attack, but it's more of like, so for example, what I posted on TikTok recently was this person came into my chat, and this is a comment I get literally all the time. Why do you use the LGBTQI plus tag? What does that have to do with your stream? And I said, I use it because I want to, because I'm queer. That's my identity. And I use it so that other people, to signify to other people that this is a place where they can come, be themselves, and be open and talk about their identity, or just feel safer to talk about whatever they want, without fear of me judging them, or just to find commonality, someone who can understand your experience. And it's just constantly this back and forth of like, well, that has nothing to do with your stream. And in this one instance, I asked them, I said, I have ADHD as a tag on my stream as well. You didn't ask me about that. That has nothing to do with my stream. Why is that not an issue for you?
Fine.
And I was like, if you're a homophobe, just say you're a homophobe. Like let's just make this easy. I don't want to mince words here. And that happens all the time. I think last year for Pride Month, I was on Front Page, and what should have been a joyous occasion, a chance for me to be put in the spotlight on the front page of Twitch, thousands of viewers, just being myself and getting my stream out there. What should have been like an experience for me ended up being 2 hours of me fighting back and forth between trolls, and then getting told that I'm an angry person because I was they pretty much gaslighted me the whole time. And I was like, do you understand? Like, you come in here and you say, why do gay people have to make everything about being gay? But before you came in here, I was talking about Mario Kart. You're the one who brought up being gay. The only reason we're talking about it now is because you brought it up, and then you want to get mad at me because I'm talking about it. Like, it's like mental gymnastics with these people, and like it's frustrating. But when you talk about it, like, after the fact, it's kind of funny. Like, I can laugh about it now because I'm like, really. But in the moment, I was like, oh, I'm gonna call your mamas and tell them what they're doing on the internet. Like,
have you ever had one of those interactions where you're talking to a troll, say, where you've had this behavior, but you've managed to turn it around, and they've sat and listened to you, and they've stayed? Like, I've been on the front page with the ambassador thing and everything like that prior. I've had these conversations with people where they're like, well, why are you using this tag? What's it for? And then you said, well, does it bother you? Is there something you want to talk about? Like, let's have this open discussion. And I've stopped in the middle of like a game or something, and I've just completely forgot to play it for ages, and just sat there, spoke to them, and they've listened, and they stick around. And now they don't care that I'm gay. They realize that we still have that common interest in gaming, and it's basically for discoverability, even though discoverability is still a bit poor, but we don't talk about that.
I definitely agree that there are times where people will learn, and I do think that there are definitely moments where you should turn those situations into teaching moments, especially as someone who was a teacher for many years. I do believe in teaching moments. However, as I was talking earlier about, queer coded villains, listen, if I have to be the villain and stop to deal with some trolls, I will gladly. If I have to be the angry gay guy on Twitch, I will do it. Like, don't tempt me. I have fun with that. Like, but yeah, if it could be a teaching moment and not have to get aggressive, then like that's great too. But you kind of have to read the room and pick your fights, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think as you're describing that, Toph, I'm kind of thinking of how gay liberation has kind of changed from picketing and holding signs and I mean, that's still good, right? But there's all these other communities where you're doing activist work to bring visibility to the LGBT community. Do you see that as activism, or how do you see that?
For me, I do. And that's why, like, I know I said it kind of jokingly and flippantly, but I do say all the time, if I have to stop what I'm doing, because I play Animal Crossing, I play Nintendo. A lot of people come when I stream. I'm a morning streamer, so I'm usually comfy cozy. And I'm like, that is who I am, but I'm also a mirror and I reflect people's energy. And if I have to get aggressive and if I have to stop what I'm doing to talk about whatever and defend myself and my community, even if it makes other people uncomfortable, because there have been times where I'll address like a troll, but other people in the community who are not involved will be like, oh, Toph, you're talking about this too much. Like, can we just move on? And I'll tell them, no, if it makes you uncomfortable, leave. Because what matters to me is that regardless of what anyone else thinks, if me getting angry, I just want people, especially queer people, young queer people, maybe closeted queer people, I want them to look at me and say, or think, if a troll comes at me or someone comes at me a certain kind of way, I don't have to take it. I can fight back. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't care if anyone says I'm angry, I'm aggressive. I don't care, because this is what I believe. I'm firm in my beliefs, and I know that what I'm saying is true. And I'm only reflecting the energy back to the person who's attacking me. Like, a lot of people, I think, in this world think two wrongs don't make a right, but there are situations where you don't have to be the good guy, and it's not our responsibility to always be the good guy and always to be the pincushion, So I personally think, for me, that is a form of activism, because Activision, like the gaming company. Activism, because we're using our platform to show all aspects of ourselves, all aspects of what it is to be queer on a public platform. And that's the good and the bad. There are times, like Ben said, where it's a teaching moment and we want to show people that you can teach people to change. But then there are other times where you just have to get aggressive and stand up for what you believe in and stand up for yourself. And if I can change someone's mind or make someone have a little bit more confidence in themselves as a queer person, then if I'm changing lives with my channel, then that is activism to me.
I agree 100%.
Feel very empowered.
Sorry, I'm from New York. I'm just angry all the time.
Toph for president.
I have one other question around gaming. It's a little bit of one of the other issues I had researched in gaming. It's been changing in recent years in an attempt to address the history of erasure in games, as well as there's just been downright bad representation as well. Last year there was a game called Tell Me Why, became the first video game to feature a trans lead character. And even though it had a pro-cop stance that left much to be desired, the makers worked closely with GLAAD, Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. Worked with GLAAD employees to make sure it didn't fall into the same trap as the hit Last of Us 2, which was a game that featured a trans character who gets dead named. For those of you that are tuning in, that dead named is using a trans or binary person's name prior to the transition, or another name to deny or mock them. That's what the term dead name means. And then in late 2020, there was another big hit, a video game called Cyberpunk 2077. And that drew ire from trans activists for allowing players to actually clock trans characters as part of the gameplay. For those that are unfamiliar listening in that don't know what clocked means, it's a slang term used to reflect someone transgender is being recognized as trans, and not all trans folks are concerned with passing. Some are, some aren't. So with all of that said, what do you find game creators are doing to kind of create, to address these kinds of issues? Have you noticed any difference, or what does their silence convey?
I think for me personally, what I noticed with developers now, more especially since the Cyberpunk debacle, because that was one of the first, especially like when you really start to pay attention. For me, like Cyberpunk was one of the biggest, the most noise made about it, but I'm sure there was more before. But the developers are now listening. They're asking the questions through the voices of gamers and social media being a powerful tool. How they've now got people actively hiring people in specific demographics that you might see, such as trans community or the Black community or pans. You see any sort of, they're hiring those people to be the voice actors and ask them for their experiences. Even falls so far as to say like mental health as well. You've got pretty much like Senua's Sacrifice that dealt with schizophrenia. They've hired the right people they've hired people for their experiences, so it's the most authentic, rather than just getting another Scarlett Johansson and being like, here's this is what our interpretation of what this means. A poor Scarlett Johansson reference, but still. But they are listening a lot more now, and I think in the last couple of years, just outside of Cyberpunk, I've enjoyed every queer story I've come across so far, because you can tell it's heartfelt. I think when you look at games like Life is Strange, every single one of them has been beautiful when it has represented the queer community. There's been a few other indie games that I've looked at and actually gone to then play the rest of their games because I enjoyed the story that they told, like Boyfriend Dungeon, which was, it sounds silly, but it's actually brilliant. All the queer stories, unpacking a completely silent story.
Unpacking was impactful.
Fantastic. I see what you did there. Another fantastic story. It's just the developers are listening and proactively asking queer communities or Black communities or any other community out there for their input on how they can make it the most authentic, if not just by hiring them. And that's something that we need to see a lot more of, so these big AAA games don't fall flat on their face before they've even left the warehouse.
Yeah, interesting. So you have seen certainly difference in the last few years in terms of game creators making safer spaces and representation. Toph, did you want to add anything to that?
I just had another example to kind of add to that, and Dead by Daylight, which Ben is a Dead by Daylight partner. Dead by Daylight, which is produced by Behavior Interactive, they recently just revealed that one of their original characters, they revealed that this character David King was in fact a homosexual man. And one thing that I really appreciate about that is, one, David King is a very typically masculine character that a lot of I think cis straight men who play the game played as, and to make a character like that now canonically queer is in a way kind of a bold move. And what I really appreciate about Behavior Interactive in general, specifically, is that unlike other companies, Behavior Interactive hired a couple of people, or a team of professionals and queer people who could help them introduce this story about David in as professional ways they can, and as authentic as authentically as they can. And it took them 2 years to do it. They announced it like 2 years ago that they were hiring a team, and then the announcement came like last month. So they really put their time into that. And additionally, unlike other companies who might, they stay silent, they add queer elements to their AAA games and stay silent, Behavior Interactive, they will say openly on their Twitter, like, we don't care if you have a problem with this. Like, if you have a problem with this character being gay, that's on you. We love him, and this is who he is. And I just think that's incredible. And I think, again, Behavior Interactive is not a AAA studio, but like, we need more studios like that. We need more studios to openly advocate and defend this community, the LGBTQI plus community. So
it's actually taking a position,
exactly,
on these issues and standing behind that. And I think that's, systemically too, we had talked about having this panel in June, where so many organizations have, Pride and do it and then forget about it for the rest of the year. So I think it's important what you're saying about, how when we have non-discrimination, and so many organizations have non-discrimination policies, to really follow through on them, like you're saying, and taking a position. Would each of you maybe describe a moment in gaming that had a significant impact on you, specifically as it relates to being queer, if that's how you identify?
Oh,
we can come
all the games I've played.
I'm trying to think. There's absolutely loads of them.
I will say this is not like an impactful, like emotional impactful, but I do remember when this was a couple of years ago, they released a game called Dream Daddy. And I know that sounds like so silly of a name, but it's a dating simulator where it's an all like daddy, like not like daddy like that, like they're like single dads. It's like a single dad dating simulator.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying.
But I remember when that game came out, because a lot of dating simulators are usually female protagonists, male suitors. And if it is an all male cast, a lot of these dating games are made in Japan or Asia, and a lot of the times it's kind of like fetishized in that kind of yaoi BL boys love kind of, like, it's not a game made by a lot of like those yaoi same-sex games that you see, or anime even. Those are not written by queer people. Those are written by usually straight women. So to see a game like Dream Daddy, which I believe both of the lead developers were queer, it just felt very real. Like playing that game, it felt like the dialogue was very real. The portrayals of the characters, no one was like an archetype or a stereotype. It just felt very cool. And playing it on stream and seeing other people, when that game came out, I saw so many cis straight men play it and enjoy it as well, and it just seemed so normal. And it was just a moment where I was like, wow, like this indie game about like gay dads has such a reach on Twitch, and it was just so cool to see. It was like it was how we were talking about earlier about seeing representation in media. The more you see it, you're like, wow, this is really nice. Like this is happening. So I think that was like maybe the first time in the 5 years or so I've been on Twitch that I saw like a very, very queer game spread so far on the platform in a positive way.
Even the Colonel Sanders one at one point.
Wait, was that queer? Was that one queer as well?
I mean, I certainly made it queer. You'd be surprised. I wasn't expecting it to be so lovely.
Spicy?
I see what you did there as well. I think I think I always fall back on Life is Strange. I always fall back on Life is Strange when it comes to the games that there's not one person that I've met that hasn't loved it. Whether it's not, you sort of build your own future in the first one. It's not really explored in the second, but in the third, it's run throughout. And like the connection I have to them games, I get excited at every sort of media piece that comes out. I've even got something on my wall over here and a denim jacket that has Life is Strange on it, but I became obsessed with them. But it's beautiful. And I don't think there's been very many. Well, there's loads of them, but when a queer story is told and it's told properly and it hits, it's something that me and my community drop everything. Okay, nothing's going to happen except this on this day. We will sit here, we will play this until we finish it, and
Solidarity.
we do. It's always worth picking up if you ever get a minute or two.
Yeah. Cute. This is I think that you know, to have you think a little bit about your gaming experience. You know, the queer community is really a subculture of symbols, of words, rituals, and practices that are not identical to those in the larger culture. You know, the word avatar comes to mind as one symbol. You know, avatars are a metaphor. You know, and the etymology of metaphor is to cross over from one realm to another, which I think is really interesting. You know, I'm curious about the avatars that you've created in your game experience and how they speak to or represent you. What would you say that they're metaphors of?
When I hear avatar, I think gaming avatar.
Yeah, you mean like characters or?
Yes, characters. Yeah.
Oh God, I dread to think if mine would be nothing like me. I'm 6 foot, and according to lore, it would be like 3'5" or something. Like a character called Little Legs, which is the name I used on Twitch for so long. Ooh, I mean, I never romanticize them in the sense that they were queer. It's just that you kind of live up or role play that particular character. But anytime I'm given a choice in a video game where I pick and choose a character, it's always queer, always will be, regardless of what they do. Even in Animal Crossing, I've made that character queer. It has its own backstory. It's got its own grandmother that has a house there. I've not logged into it for about 12 months, but we don't talk about that. Um, but every time I will always pick the queer option or liken it to something that I would like to say, but have never had the opportunity to say, especially if it's a sort of choice narrative game. I'm taking the leaps and finding out the repercussions so I can learn from them, if that makes any sort of sense.
Yeah, no, I love that answer, Ben. I think that's you know, I'm thinking about the film Avatar as well. You know, there's a gay narrative that's missed in that film, for example. You know, that the primary narrative in that film is not between Neytiri and what was his name, Jake Sully. That's not the main narrative. The main narrative is Jake to being embodied in his avatar. He yearns for the DNA of his twin brother more than anything. And there's a love story that goes on between them, but most of us don't. We miss the narrative in Avatar when that's actually, and it's not. I think it's not so much to make the film gay as it is to see it through a gay-centered lens. You know, even Judy. You know, there's a lesbian poet. Her name's Judy Grahn. She wrote a wonderful book called Another Mother Tongue. And she talked about gay people being transporters of information between the sexes, that they would move in and out and reveal information to one another. And I thought, that's such a visionary, you know, that's such a visionary idea to think about how queer people reveal things to the sexes that have been kept separate, and even referred to them as shamans. So anyway, so I sorry, I kind of like took this on another tangent.
No, I like that. I like that.
Yeah. Did you want to say something, Toph, about, you know, avatars that you've created or characters that you've created?
Oh no, I pretty much agree with Ben. Every character that I make is just an extension of myself, but I always make sure, even when I'm playing games where I'm not actually creating the main character and I'm playing as a pre-made character, I will still make them queer. Like Sora from Kingdom Hearts, move over, Kyrie. No, thank you. Like it doesn't matter who you are. Like I will put myself into it, because that's what I did my entire life. Is again going back to representation. We kind of had to get creative when we were kids, so we would read into those things and we would kind of imagine, what would this character look like, or be like, rather, what would this character be like if they were me, if they were queer, if they could romance someone else. It's like there's a very popular series Persona, and all the romance options are the characters male, and all the romance options are female. But it's like, why has it got to be like that? Let me think about all the possibilities of, you know, who I could romance if we could romance who we want to romance. So yeah, I think just putting our queerness into characters, whether they're our own avatars or not, I think is probably something that we all do, whether intentional or not.
It's going to happen always, without fail.
Oh. We've got about 5 minutes left, and in the time that we have left, I'm wondering if you can, you know, briefly describe some of the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people who are important to you in your life.
The closest, I've got a lot of close friends. If I could describe them, I would say that they're messy, but I love them because they're messy, because they speak for what they believe in and they don't care how it comes across to anybody. We're in our 30s now, and it took us long enough to find ourselves. So we all became very unapologetically queer, without, you know, we don't want to break any bones or anything, but we want to make sure we're listened to. And that's the one thing I wish I had when I was younger. That extends to my own Twitch community. I wouldn't say I enforce them to be their most authentic selves, but they know that they can be themselves when they are with me. And if it helps, you know, even if they take away one thing from a stream where we've had a conversation about queer issues, or just in general about finding yourself, then they brought that into their own lives, great, we're doing something right. Although, you know, I'm not, you know, licensed in any way. I'm only speaking from my own personal experiences, and you'd be surprised how often that does help with. They're just wonderful people. My community, my friends, still very messy, still love them.
Well, of course, obviously for me as well, I have a lot of queer friends who I hold very dear, and my community has a lot of queer people as well. I also wanted to mention that Ben and I are on a team here on Twitch called Rainbow Arcade, which is a collective of queer streamers here on Twitch, and we have incredible teammates, leaders as well. I believe Tanya was in here before, Cypher of Tier. She was in the chat earlier. Just won an award at the Gaming Awards. Does incredible things for advocacy and raising money for different organizations, tabletop gaming, like. She does it all. She truly does it all. And I do look up to her a lot, as well as, again, everyone in Rainbow Arcade, because it has been, I think if it wasn't for Rainbow Arcade, I don't know if I would have made so many connections with other queer streamers on Twitch as fast as I did. So yeah,
wonderful.
Definitely check out Rainbow Arcade.
Rainbow Arcade, okay. And the 2 minutes that we have left, what is next for you? Is there anything that you're working on?
Sleep pattern. Schedule.
I was like, Ben does it all. What's Ben not doing?
No. We are, in all honesty, it's not uncommon knowledge. We are looking at launching Pride UK and I, which is a Twitch team dedicated to pretty much Pride United Kingdom and Ireland. We were going to go so far as EU, but it would make it difficult in terms of what I expect or what I would want from it. And then I've got a lot of work with Black Twitch UK and hopefully reigniting some fires within Rainbow Arcade. So, you know, just trying to make everything a bit more active, cohesive, and let people get to know each other, you know?
Yeah, very good.
New queer friends. Thank you,
Ben. Toph, did you take a 30 seconds to share?
Yeah, I mean, it's short because I have no plans. I just moved back to America from literally a decade in Japan, so I'm kind of focusing more on getting my life set up. Yeah, stabilizing. I want to do more on Twitch, be active, of course, and I'm also sort of unrelated, but I'm applying for jobs, and I want to actually start working in the gaming industry. So I'm currently looking for jobs in the gaming industry so I can continue content creation, but also working in the field that I love. So I just want to keep being queer and keep gaming and keep creating.
Wonderful. thank you both for joining us today. That was really cool to get some insight into gaming and streaming online and what you're working on as well. I feel more aware too of another aspect of my community that I didn't know. So thank you and be well.
Thank you for moderating.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for having us today.
And thank you for watching, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.